The cub was already screaming when they walked me into the chamber, claws raked white across the floor plating, and the handler bracing the lead like it might take his arm off at the elbow. Nobody told me to be afraid. I just wasn't, and that seemed to bother them more than the cub did. Designation tallies Wren, 16 years, unaccompanied. The processing officer didn't look up from his slate. His name tag read Vantor, and his voice had the flat, bored cruelty of a man who had said the next sentence 1,000 times. Asset viability screening, final case of the cycle. This unit failed handler containment twice this morning. Bit 2 testers. You understand what a third failure means for your file. I understood. A third failure meant the labor block instead of a placement pod. It meant Pip, my brother, 9 years old and already sorted into a family 3 decks up, growing up without me a single corridor away. I understood it the way you understand cold water completely, and without much use for the feeling. I understand, I said. Then approach the containment line. Do not run. Running excites it. The duskfin lynx cub they dragged off some smuggler's hold 3 weeks back was the size of a large dog and built like something designed to outlast you. Charcoal fur, ember gold eyes, ribs showing under the muscle. 2 grown testers had needed stitches. I walked to the line anyway because the alternative was worse than claws, and because I was too tired from 2 months of intake cues to manufacture fear I didn't have. The cub stopped screaming the second I stepped past the markers. It didn't relax. It went still in a different way, head low, every muscle coiled, watching me the way something watches a thing it hasn't decided about yet. The handler's knuckles went white on the lead. I crouched down anyway, slow, hands open, the way you'd let a strange dog smell you before it bit you or didn't. Tallies stepped back from the line, Vantor said, already reaching for his slate to log the failure. Easy, I told the cub, not him. Just that. 1 word, no weight behind it, the same tone I used on Pip when the sirens went off and he couldn't find his shoes. The cub crossed the last 4 feet of containment floor and pressed its whole skull against my collarbone hard enough to nearly knock me flat. The room went silent in the particular way. A room goes silent when several trained professionals are recalculating everything they believed 5 seconds ago. The handler actually dropped the lead. I caught the cub's weight with both arms because it had simply decided to lean on me. All 40 kilos of it, head tucked under my chin. A low rumbling sound starting somewhere in its chest that I didn't have a word for yet but would later. That is not, Vantor started, then stopped, because the cub's ears had gone flat and a thin warning growl rolled out of it at the sound of his voice, not mine. It's fine, I said, one hand flat on its shoulder. Stand down. It stood down for me, not for him. Vantor recovered fast, the way men like him always do. He gestured the handler forward with a fresh lead, voice clipped. Resecure the unit. The screening shows compliance bonding, which is a contamination risk for the labor cohort, not a placement asset. Tallies, return to the queue. The handler reached for the cub's collar. The cub didn't bite him. It didn't have to. It simply turned its whole body between us, planted its front paws, and the low rumble sharpened into something with teeth in it, aimed at the lead in his hand and nothing else. The handler froze with his arm half extended, looking at Vantor instead of the cub because the cub wasn't the one making the decision here anymore. Sit, I said quiet, and put my hand flat on its back. It sat, glaring at the handler the entire time, but it sat. Sedative protocol, Vantor said to the handler, not to me, already reaching for the kit on the wall rack. 3 cc dose, standard juvenile dosage, will resecure once it's down. I put my hand flat on Cole's chest, over the spot where his heart was going hard and fast under all that muscle. If you put a needle in him in front of me, you're going to have a much worse afternoon than the 2 men he already bit. It wasn't a threat. I didn't raise my voice. I was just telling him the truth the way I'd tell him the floor was cold. Vantor's hand stopped halfway to the kit, and something in his face recalculated the math a second time. not because of what I'd said, but because of how little it had cost me to say it. Vantor's jaw worked. This changes nothing about your classification. The bond is irrelevant to viability scoring. Then why is it still attached to me? I said, and not attached to either of the men it actually bit. A few of the other unaccompanied minors had drifted to the observation rail without anyone telling them to. Kids from the morning queue, the ones who'd watched their own screenings end in restraint and reclassification slips. Nobody in that gallery was used to watching anything go their way. Nobody moved either, like the air itself might break it if they did. Vantor tried the slate again, tapping through screens like an answer might appear if he looked hard enough. Compliance bonding under duress conditions is not equivalent to placement suitability. The unit is property of the authority pending disposition. It's not property right now, I said. It's sitting on my foot. It was. All 40 kilos settled across my boot like it intended to stay there through the heat death of the ship. A couple of the kids at the rail laughed, the short, surprised kind of laugh that comes out before you remember you're not supposed to be amused at intake. Vantor's face did something complicated, the look of a man watching a procedure he'd run 100 times refuse, for the first time, to behave like a procedure. He turned to the senior administrator who'd appeared in the doorway sometime during the standoff, drawn by whatever alert had gone out the moment containment failed twice in one morning, and the administrator was already looking at the cub instead of the paperwork, the way you look at something that's making your case for you. Run the cohort risk assessment again, the administrator said, properly this time, with the unit's actual behavior, not the morning's incident report. Vantor's mouth thinned to a line. He didn't argue. Men like him never argue where it's witnessed. They just lose quietly in front of the one room they most needed not to. It took 11 minutes to reclassify me. The cub didn't move from my foot for any of them, head resting on its paws, one eye tracking Vantor every time he came near the desk like it was keeping score. When the new slip printed placement, provisional custodial unit, companion designation, Lynx class juvenile, bonded, Vantor handed it to me without a word and without meeting my eyes, which told me everything the paperwork didn't. I named him Cole that night, in the corridor outside Pip's new family's quarters, while my brother knelt down to let a 40-kilo predator sniff his shoes with the same patient gravity Cole gave everything. Pip didn't flinch either. Maybe it runs in the family. Maybe it's just easier not to be afraid of something that's already decided you're its. The other unaccompanied minors started calling it claimed, not cargo within the week, their own phrase, passed corridor to corridor faster than any authority memo, because every one of them had stood at that containment line at some point and watched their own file get sorted like freight. They liked knowing one of theirs hadn't been. Cole grew into something that made grown handlers cross to the far side of the gangway. He still slept across my feet every night, still went still and quiet the instant I said his name, still put himself between me and anyone whose voice carried the wrong kind of authority in it. Vantor transferred to records processing 4 months later. I heard he asked for it. It wasn't the last time someone underestimated what was attached to me. A scrap runner cornered me in the lower gangway during the 3rd month, the kind of man who scavenges off unaccompanied kids because nobody checks on us twice, and he had a hand on my pack strap before he'd registered the shape lying in the shadow of the bulkhead behind me. Cole didn't growl first that time. He just stood, slow and unhurried, and let the man see exactly how much bigger he'd gotten since the containment chamber. The scrap runner let go of the strap so fast he dropped half of what he'd already lifted off 2 other kids that week. He didn't run. He apologized twice, backing away with both hands raised like that would help. Cole watched him all the way to the bend in the corridor before he sat back down at my feet, satisfied, and let me finish picking up the dropped goods to return them. Pip still tells people his sister tamed a monster. I never correct him. It wasn't tamming. Cole never needed tamming. He needed one person in that whole cold processing line who didn't look at him and see a liability. I just happened to be standing there, too tired to be afraid, when he decided I'd do.